The sound of Mark's hushed voice slithered under our bedroom door at 3 in the morning. I lay perfectly still, my heart drumming against my ribs as his words became clearer. I can't talk long. No, she's sleeping. Listen, we need to be careful about this. I'm Eleanor, and until that moment, I thought I knew what betrayal felt like. I was wrong. The mattress beneath me felt like concrete as I strained to catch every word. Mark paced in the hallway, his footsteps creating a rhythm that matched my racing pulse. Our son Ryan's door creaked. He must have moved closer to avoid waking me. The irony wasn't lost on me. The numbers don't add up, I know. We'll figure something out before the audit. Audit. My fingers clutched the sheets. In 15 years of marriage, Mark had never mentioned any audit. Janet's got my back on this. She'll smooth things over with the board. Of course his mother would be involved. Janet, the woman who'd spent the last decade trying to prove I wasn't good enough for her precious son. The woman who'd criticized everything from my cooking to my parenting, always with that razor-sharp smile. I slipped out of bed, my bare feet silent against the hardwood floor. The hall light cast Mark's shadow through the gap beneath the door, a distorted version of the man I'd married. Look, I've got to go. Eleanor's been asking questions about the late nights at the office. Yeah. No, she doesn't suspect anything. She's too busy taking care of her sick mother to notice. My mother, Susan, the woman fighting for her life while I juggled being a wife, mother, and daughter. The woman who'd warned me about Mark's ambition when we first started dating. The conversation ended with a whispered goodbye that felt like acid in my ears. I counted to 30 before sliding back into bed, arranging myself exactly as I'd been when he left. The door opened. Mark's cologne, the expensive one Janet had given him for Christmas, drifted in before him. The bed shifted as he settled in, and I felt his hand brush my shoulder. Eleanor? You awake? I kept my breathing steady, fighting the urge to flinch away from his touch. His hand lingered for a moment before withdrawing. Morning arrived with the usual chaos. Ryan bouncing around the kitchen, shoveling cereal into his mouth while I packed his lunch. Mark adjusting his tie in the mirror, the perfect picture of a successful sales manager. Big presentation today, he announced, kissing my cheek. Might be another late one. I handed him his coffee, careful to keep my expression neutral. The third this week? His smile flickered. You know how it is during audit season. Actually, I don't. The words slipped out before I could stop them. Mark's eyes met mine in the mirror, and for a split second, I saw something unfamiliar there. Something cold. You've seemed stressed lately, he said, turning to face me. Maybe you should take a break from visiting your mother so much. Janet mentioned she'd be happy to help more with Ryan. The coffee mug trembled in my hand. I'm fine. Are you? His tone was gentle, concerned, the same tone he used when convincing clients to trust him. You've been different since Susan got sick, distracted, paranoid even. Ryan appeared between us, backpack slung over one shoulder. Mom, can Lily's mom drive me to soccer practice today? Please? I nodded, grateful for the interruption. Lily had been my best friend since college, the only person who saw through Mark's charm from the beginning. Mark checked his watch. I should go. Don't wait up. He kissed Ryan's head, squeezed my shoulder, and was gone. I watched through the kitchen window as he backed out of the driveway, his phone already pressed to his ear. The morning sun caught his wedding ring, sending a flash of light across our manicured lawn. That's when I knew, really knew, that everything was about to change. The perfect life I'd built was nothing but smoke and mirrors, and somewhere in the darkness of last night, I'd finally caught the scent of fire. The dinner table had become a battlefield, and Janet's voice was the first shot fired across its polished surface. Eleanor, dear, you've overcooked the chicken again. She dabbed her lips with a napkin, each movement precise and deliberate. Mark needs proper nutrition, especially with how hard he's working lately. I gripped my fork tighter, watching Mark's face for any reaction. He kept his eyes on his plate, pushing food around like a child avoiding vegetables. I think it's good, Ryan piped up, mouth full of the allegedly ruined chicken. Janet's smile could have frozen hell. That's because your palate hasn't been properly developed yet, sweetheart. Perhaps if your mother spent more time in the kitchen instead of running off to visit Susan every day. Mother, Mark's warning came too late. What? I'm simply pointing out that priorities seem misplaced lately. The house is a mess, dinner is subpar, and poor Ryan barely sees his mother. I set down my fork, the clink against china echoing in the sudden silence. Ryan sees me plenty, and my mother needs me. Of course she does, Janet cooed, reaching for her wine glass. But Mark needs you too, don't you, darling? Mark cleared his throat. Actually, I've been meaning to discuss something. He straightened his shoulders, a gesture I'd seen countless times before bad news. Mother's offered to help more around here, maybe take Ryan after school some days. The chicken turned to ash in my mouth. I don't need help. Don't be proud, Eleanor, Janet interjected. Everyone can see you're struggling. Those dark circles under your eyes, the state of the laundry room. I said I don't need help. My voice came out sharper than intended, making Ryan flinch. Mark's hand found mine under the table, but his grip felt like a warning rather than comfort. Honey, we're just trying to help, with the audit at work and everything else. What audit? The question hung between us like smoke. Janet's eyebrows shot up. Oh, hasn't Mark told you? The company's doing a complete financial review. It's been terribly stressful for him. No, I said slowly, watching Mark's face. He hasn't mentioned it. Well, perhaps if you asked about his day more often, instead of always talking about your mother's condition. May I be excused? Ryan interrupted, his plate half full. I nodded, grateful for the break in tension. He disappeared upstairs, leaving me alone with my inquisitors. Speaking of Susan, Janet continued, have you considered a care facility? The strain of caring for her is clearly affecting your domestic duties. The wine glass in my hand trembled. My domestic duties? Eleanor. Mark's voice carried that same gentle warning from this morning. Mother's just concerned. Yes, concerned. Janet reached across the table, her manicured fingers stopping just short of touching mine. Mark tells me you've been emotional lately, asking strange questions, having trouble sleeping. My eyes snapped to Mark. He had the decency to look away. I'm fine, I said, standing abruptly. I should check on Ryan. Sit down, Eleanor. Janet's command cracked like a whip. We're not finished. For the first time in 15 years, I looked at my mother-in-law. Really looked at her. Behind the designer clothes and perfect makeup, I saw something predatory in her eyes. Actually, we are. I started clearing plates, my movements mechanical. I have to call my mother's nurse about tomorrow's schedule. Mark stood, blocking my path to the kitchen. About that, I think we should skip visiting Susan tomorrow. The company's having a dinner, and I need you there. Mother's already agreed to watch Ryan. Already agreed? The plates clattered as I set them down. When exactly did you plan all this? This morning, he said smoothly. When you were too busy to ask about my day. Janet's chair scraped back. I should go. Eleanor clearly isn't in a state to have a rational discussion. She kissed Mark's cheek, then turned to me. Do think about what we've said, dear. Everyone can see you're drowning. After she left, Mark and I stood in silence, the remains of dinner growing cold between us. You told your mother I've been emotional. My voice sounded distant, even to myself. He stepped closer, that familiar cologne making my stomach turn. I'm worried about you. We all are. Don't be. I moved past him, shoulder brushing his chest. I'm seeing things very clearly now. His hand caught my arm. What's that supposed to mean? I smiled, and for the first time it felt like Janet's. Nothing, dear. Nothing at all. Lily's coffee had gone cold, but her eyes remained hot with anger as I showed her Mark's company statements I'd found hidden in his home office. These numbers don't match what he reported last quarter, she said, tapping the paper with a manicured nail. Not even close. The cafe around us hummed with afternoon activity, providing perfect cover for this conversation. I'd chosen it specifically because it was across town, far from Janet's network of spies. I know, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. And look at the dates. Lily's breath caught. The day before your mother's surgery, when he said he couldn't be there because of that emergency board meeting. He was in Phoenix. The words tasted bitter. With someone named Olivia. A text lit up my phone. Janet, again. I turned it face down without reading it. Have you confronted him? Lily asked. What's the point? He'll just tell me I'm being paranoid. That's his favorite word lately. I wrapped my hands around my cup, seeking warmth that wasn't there. Besides, he's got Janet convinced I'm having some sort of breakdown. That manipulative bit. Eleanor? My heart stopped. That voice, I hadn't heard it in 15 years, but I'd know it anywhere. Derek stood beside our table, looking exactly like he had in high school, just with touches of grey at his temples. His presence felt like a punch to the gut. I thought that was you, he said, smiling that same crooked smile. How's Mark? Lily's eyes darted between us. She knew our history. The high school sweetheart Mark had saved me from, according to Janet's version of events. He's fine, I managed. How are you? Just made partner at Hamilton and Reed. He gestured to the papers on the table. Actually, we're handling the audit for Mark's company. The world tilted sideways. You're what? Small world, right? His expression shifted, becoming more serious. Listen, Eleanor. My phone buzzed again. This time I looked. A text from Ryan's school. I have to go, I said, standing so quickly I nearly knocked over my coffee. Ryan's sick. Derek caught my arm as I moved past him. We should talk. About the audit. I pulled away. I can't. Lily gathered the papers, shoving them in my bag. I'll drive you. The ride to Ryan's school was silent until Lily finally spoke. That wasn't a coincidence, was it? Derek showing up? I don't know. My head was spinning. Nothing makes sense anymore. Ryan was pale when we picked him up, but not from illness. Mom, he whispered as we walked to the car. Grandma Janet came to school today. She talked to my teacher about you. My steps faltered. What? She said you're not well, that sometimes you might say strange things. His voice cracked. Are you sick like Grandma Susan? The parking lot swam before my eyes. Lily's hand found my shoulder, steadying me. Your mother's fine, she told Ryan firmly. Sometimes grown-ups just disagree about things. Back home, I tucked Ryan into bed with actual fever now, probably from stress. As I closed his door, voices drifted up from downstairs. She's becoming unstable, Mark. Janet's voice, in my house, again. First the paranoid accusations, now she's meeting with her ex-boyfriend. Olivia saw them together. My blood turned to ice. Olivia. The name from the Phoenix receipts. Keep your voice down, Mark hissed. Ryan's upstairs. We need to act now before she ruins everything. I've already spoken to Dr. Phillips about getting her evaluated. I must have made a sound because they both looked up. Mark's face showed genuine surprise. Janet's showed something else. Satisfaction. Eleanor, dear, she purred. We were just discussing... Get out. My voice was steel. Now, honey, Mark started, using his client voice again. Mother's just concerned. Get out. I descended the stairs slowly, deliberately. Both of you. Janet drew herself up. This is exactly what we're talking about. These emotional outbursts. I know about Phoenix, I said quietly. I know about Olivia. I know about the audit. And Derek, he's handling it now. Isn't that interesting? The color drained from Mark's face. Janet's hand flew to her throat. So yes, I continued, reaching the bottom step. Get out of my house, or the next conversation I have with Derek won't be about old times. They left, but Janet's parting smile told me this wasn't over. As I locked the door behind them, my phone buzzed one final time. A text from Derek. We really need to talk. There's more you should know. I stared at the message, feeling something shift inside me. The time for being a victim was over. Now I needed to become something else entirely. The hospital corridor stretched endlessly before me as I rushed toward my mother's room. Susan's nurse had called during my meeting with Derek, cutting short his revelations about Mark's company. I found her struggling to breathe, her usually strong hands trembling as they clutched the bed sheets. "Eleanor," she wheezed, "Janet was here." My blood froze. When? Just before. She gestured weakly at the monitors beside her bed. She wanted to talk about Mark, about you. The steady beeping of machines filled the silence as I checked her medication chart. Numbers didn't add up, again, just like Mark's financial statements. What did she say? She thinks... Susan's breath caught. She thinks you're unstable. Wanted my permission for something. I wouldn't... The door opened behind me. Mark stood there, Janet hovering at his shoulder like a dark shadow. "I called them," the nurse explained, slipping past them. "As next of kin." "I'm her next of kin," I snapped. Janet's lips curved into that familiar serpentine smile. "Actually, dear, Mark has medical power of attorney now, for both you and Susan." The room tilted. "That's impossible." "You signed it last month," Mark said softly. "Remember? With the insurance papers." Memory flashed. A stack of documents, Mark's gentle insistence, my distracted signature while worried about Ryan's parent-teacher conference. "Dr. Phillips thinks your mother's condition is affecting your judgment," Janet continued. "The stress, the paranoia, it's all connected." Susan's monitor beeped faster. "Eleanor didn't... I never... Mother, please," I whispered, gripping her hand. "Save your strength." "Get out," Susan managed, glaring at Janet. "Both of you." Mark stepped forward. "Susan, we're only trying to..." "I said get out." The force of her words triggered a coughing fit. The nurse returned with Dr. Phillips, a man I'd never seen before. His eyes held no warmth as he reviewed the charts. "Mrs. Harrison," he addressed me, "perhaps we should step outside and discuss your mother's care. And yours." "I'm not leaving her." "Eleanor." Mark's hand found my shoulder, heavy with false concern. "Think of Ryan. Think of how this behavior affects him." "My behavior?" I turned to face him fully. "You mean like questioning missing funds? Like asking about Phoenix?" His fingers dug into my flesh. "You're proving our point." "Mrs. Harrison," Dr. Phillips interrupted, "your husband mentions you've been experiencing paranoid delusions." "Ask Derek at Hamilton and Reed about delusions," I shot back. "Ask him about the audit." Mark's grip tightened painfully. "You've been talking to Derek?" A new voice cut through the tension. "She has." Lily stood in the doorway, phone in hand. "And I've been recording everything since I got here." Janet's composure cracked. "You can't..." "Can't what?" Lily stepped inside. "Document a conversation or prevent medical manipulation?" "This is a private family matter," Janet hissed. "Exactly." Lily's smile was razor-sharp. "That's why I called Eleanor's father. He's flying in tonight. You remember him, right, Janet? The federal judge?" The room went silent except for the steady beep of Susan's monitor. Mark's hand fell away from my shoulder. "We should discuss this elsewhere," Dr. Phillips suggested, suddenly less certain. "Yes," I agreed. "We should. After my father's legal team reviews those power of attorney documents, and the hospital records, and Mark's company audit." Janet recovered first. "You're making a mistake." "No," Susan's voice was weak but clear. "She's finally seeing clearly." They left, taking their false concern and veiled threats with them. Lily stayed by the door, still recording as Dr. Phillips hurried down the hall after them. "Your father's not really coming, is he?" Susan asked once we were alone. "No." I smoothed her blanket, hands shaking. "But they don't know that." "Clever girl." She squeezed my fingers. "Now, tell me about Derek and this audit." "Later." I checked her oxygen levels. "You need rest." "Eleanor." Her grip tightened. "Listen to me. Janet didn't just come to talk today. She wanted access to my estate planning documents. Asked about my safety deposit box." My heart stopped. "The one with evidence of what really happened at Mark's last company." She closed her eyes. "The real reason they moved here." Lily stepped closer. "I'm still recording." I looked between them. My best friend with her phone, my mother with her secrets, and thought about the flash drive Derek had tried to show me earlier. "Keep recording," I said. "I think we're finally getting to the truth." The safety deposit box key felt impossibly heavy in my palm as I followed the bank manager down the sterile hallway. Behind me, Olivia's heels clicked against marble floors. Janet's supposedly loyal friend, now unexpectedly my ally. "I should have told you years ago," she said softly, "when Mark first started working with Janet to push out the old board members." The manager unlocked the outer door, leaving us in the viewing room. I waited until his footsteps faded before speaking. "Why now?" Olivia's carefully maintained facade cracked. "Because Janet's planning to do to you what she did to Mark's first wife." The key slipped from my fingers, clattering against the metal table. "His what? You didn't know." It wasn't a question. "Of course you didn't. Janet made sure those records disappeared before your marriage." My phone buzzed, another message from Mark. I'd been ignoring them since leaving the hospital, each one growing increasingly desperate. The latest read, "Come home now, we need to talk about Ryan." "They're using my son as leverage," I said, voice hollow. Olivia nodded. "Janet's specialty. She'll convince the court you're unstable, unfit, just like she did with Rachel." The name hit like a physical blow. "Rachel?" "Mark's first wife, the one who supposedly had a nervous breakdown after embezzling company funds." Olivia's laugh was bitter. The perfect cover story for what really happened. My hand shook as I fitted the key into the box. Inside lay a USB drive and a stack of documents, Susan's insurance against the day she knew would come. "Janet visited Rachel in the hospital," Olivia continued, "right before she signed away her rights. Her fortune, everything. The same hospital where Janet had tried to access my mother's records, where she'd arranged for that doctor to evaluate me." My phone buzzed again. A message from Lily. "Ryan's safe with me. Janet showed up at school again. Don't go home." The documents in my hand suddenly came into sharp focus. Bank statements, emails, photos. Evidence of a pattern stretching back years before I met Mark. "How many others?" I asked. "3 companies, 3 wives. You're not special, Eleanor. You're just the latest target." The truth settled like ice in my veins. Every criticism, every subtle undermining, every orchestrated failure. It hadn't been personal. It had been practice. My phone lit up with Mark's face. This time, I answered. "Where are you?" His voice was tight with barely controlled rage. "With your past," I replied, "and your pattern." A sharp intake of breath. Then, "Whatever Olivia's told you." "Rachel says hello." The line went dead. Olivia touched my arm. "We should go. Janet has people at the bank." As if summoned by her words, voices echoed from the hallway. I recognized Janet's commanding tone, the manager's apologetic murmur. "The back exit," Olivia whispered, gesturing to a service door. "I'll stall them." I hesitated. "Why are you helping me?" "Because 20 years ago, I helped them destroy Rachel. I can't watch it happen again." The voices grew closer. I shoved everything into my bag, heart pounding. "Eleanor," Janet's saccharine voice carried through the door. "Darling, we're worried about you. Mark says you're not well." I backed toward the exit, watching Olivia straighten her shoulders and arrange her features into a mask of concern. She'd fooled them for 2 decades. She could buy me 5 minutes. "Tell Mark," I said quietly, "that Rachel kept copies." Understanding flickered in Olivia's eyes as she nodded. I slipped through the service door just as the main one opened. "Oh, Janet," I heard Olivia say, her voice breaking perfectly. "Thank goodness you're here. Eleanor was saying such strange things." The service corridor led to a back alley where Derek waited in his car, engine running. Another piece of the puzzle clicking into place. "Ready?" he asked as I slid into the passenger seat. My phone buzzed one final time. A text from Mark. "You have no idea what you're doing." I thought about Rachel, about Janet's other victims, about the carefully constructed cage they'd been building around me for years. "Actually," I said, "I finally do." Derek pulled away from the curb as Janet burst out of the bank, phone to her ear. In the rearview mirror, I watched her figure grow smaller, her power diminishing with every block we put between us. The game was changing, and this time, I knew all the players. The hospital room's fluorescent lights flickered as Susan's monitors screamed their warning. I stood frozen in the doorway, watching nurses rush past me while Mark's latest threat echoed in my head. "One signature, Eleanor. That's all it takes to end this." "Code blue," someone called out. "Clear the room." Derek pulled me back into the hallway as medical staff swarmed around my mother. Through the glass, I watched them work, their movements urgent and precise. "She knew," I whispered. "She knew everything about Rachel, about the others, and she still protected me." "Eleanor," Mark's voice cut through the chaos. He stood at the end of the hallway, Janet hovering behind him like a dark sentinel. "We need to talk about Ryan." My phone vibrated, a message from Lily. "They're trying to get emergency custody. Janet's judge friend fast-tracked it." The floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet. "Where's my son?" "Safe," Janet answered, stepping forward. "Away from your increasingly erratic behavior." "What she means," Mark added softly, approaching with his hands raised like I was a cornered animal, "is that Ryan's staying with us until you get help. Dr. Phillips has already prepared the commitment papers." The monitors in Susan's room suddenly went silent. The doctor emerged, his face grave. "Mrs. Harrison?" "No." The word tore from my throat. "No, I need to speak to her. She has to tell them." "Tell them what?" Mark was beside me now, his cologne suffocating. "About your conspiracy theories, your paranoid delusions about Rachel." "Rachel was real." My voice shook. "Just like the missing funds are real. Just like the voices you hear at night," Janet interrupted smoothly. "The ones that keep you up, making you spy on your loving husband." Derek stepped between us. "Back off, Janet." "Derek." Mark's smile was razor sharp. "Still trying to save her after all these years. Tell me, does your law firm know you're sleeping with the client's unstable wife?" "What?" The accusation hit like a physical blow. "The hotel receipts," Mark continued. "The late-night meetings. Did you think we wouldn't find out?" Derek's face drained of color. "Eleanor, I can explain, but I was already backing away from all of them, my mind racing through every conversation, every secret meeting. Had Derek been working with them all along? Was this entire thing an elaborate trap?" "Security," Janet called out, her voice carrying that perfect note of concern. "My daughter-in-law is having another episode." Two guards appeared at the end of the hall. Behind them, Dr. Phillips approached with a syringe. "Just to help you calm down," he said soothingly. I turned to run, but Mark caught my arm. His grip was gentle, loving. The perfect concerned husband restraining his troubled wife. "Think about Ryan," he whispered. "Do you want him to remember his mother being dragged away? Or do you want to walk out of here with dignity?" Through the glass, I could see them covering Susan's body. All her evidence, all her secrets, dying with her. "The choice is simple," Janet added. "Sign the papers, get the help you need, or lose everything, including Ryan." The guards were closer now. Dr. Phillips uncapped the syringe. "Time to decide," Mark said softly. "Are you going to be Rachel, or are you going to be smart?" In that moment, I saw it all clearly. The perfect trap they'd constructed, fight back and prove I was unstable. Give in and lose everything. Either way, they won. My phone buzzed one final time. A message from an unknown number. "Rachel didn't die. She survived. And so will you." The guards reached for me as Dr. Phillips stepped forward with his syringe. Mark's grip remained gentle, loving, the concerned husband until the very end. I looked into his eyes, searching for any trace of the man I'd married. There was nothing there but calculated emptiness. "You're right," I said quietly. "I need to be smart." Janet's triumphant smile appeared just as I drove my elbow into Mark's solar plexus. He doubled over, his grip loosening just enough. I ran. Behind me, Janet's controlled facade finally cracked. "Stop her!" But I was already through the emergency exit, alarms blaring in my wake. They'd taken everything, my mother, my son, my life. but they hadn't taken my truth. And now, finally, I knew exactly how to use it. The annual shareholders' meeting buzzed with artificial pleasantries and expensive perfume. I stood in the shadows of the hotel ballroom, watching Mark work the crowd with his practiced charm. Janet floated nearby, her red dress a warning signal. "Ready?" Olivia appeared at my elbow, clutching her tablet. "Is she here?" "Front row." Olivia nodded toward a woman with silver-streaked hair. "Rachel flew in this morning. My mother's USB drive felt heavy in my pocket. 15 years of evidence waiting for this moment." Mark took the podium, adjusting his tie, his tell when he's nervous. "Ladies and gentlemen, before we begin..." Actually, I stepped into the light, my voice carrying across the suddenly silent room. "I'd like to say something first." Janet's champagne glass froze halfway to her lips. Mark's smile flickered but held. "Eleanor," he said smoothly, "this isn't the time for..." "For what? The truth?" I moved closer, each step deliberate. "About Phoenix, about Rachel, or about what really happened to my mother?" The crowd stirred. Rachel leaned forward, her face a mirror of my own determination. "Security!" Janet called out, but Olivia was faster. "Nobody moves," she announced, tapping her tablet. The screens behind Mark filled with documents. "Not until everyone sees exactly where their money's been going." Mark's facade cracked. "These are confidential, like the offshore accounts." I was at the podium now, close enough to smell his cologne. "Or the falsified audit reports, or maybe like Rachel's commitment papers." "She was unstable," Janet cut in, moving toward us. "Just like you're being unstable now." "Where's Ryan, Eleanor? Does he know his mother's having another breakdown?" "Ryan's safe," Lily's voice rang out from the back, "with his real grandmother's sister and the police." Mark lunged for the podium's laptop, but I was ready. "Looking for this?" I held up the USB drive. "Susan made copies. Lots of them. Dead women are clever that way." "You don't understand," he hissed, desperation replacing charm. "I did it for us, for our family." "Family?" Rachel stood, her voice steady. "Is that what you told the others too, Mark?" The room erupted in whispers. Janet's perfectly maintained composure slipped. "This is ridiculous," she announced. "These women are clearly disturbed. Dr. Phillips can confirm..." "Dr. Phillips confessed this morning." Derek stepped forward, legal papers in hand. "About the falsified psychiatric evaluations, about all of it." Mark's hands gripped the podium. "Whatever they're paying you..." "They're not paying me anything," Derek interrupted. "But the SEC is very interested in what I have to say." Cameras flashed as federal agents appeared at every exit. Janet's face went ash white. "It's over," I said quietly. "The money, the manipulation, all of it." "You stupid girl." Janet's voice trembled with rage. "You have no idea what you've done, after everything we gave you. Gave me." My laugh felt foreign. "You took everything. My marriage, my mother, my son." "I took nothing," Mark snarled, mask finally shattering. "You were nothing before me, just like Rachel was nothing, just like..." His words cut off as Rachel stepped onto the stage, calm and regal. "Tell them about Phoenix, Mark. Tell them what really happened to the last woman who knew too much." The room held its breath. In the silence, I could hear Mark's world crumbling. "This isn't..." he started, then stopped, looking to Janet for rescue. But Janet was already backing away, her predator's instincts sensing the trap closing. "The truth," I said, turning to face the crowd, "is in these documents. Every transaction, every forged signature, every falsified report. But most importantly..." I met Rachel's eyes. "Every victim's story, starting with Phoenix." "You can't prove..." Mark grabbed my arm, but security was already moving. "Actually," Rachel smiled, "we can. Dead women might be clever, Mark, but surviving ones are dangerous." As they led Mark and Janet away, I felt no triumph, no satisfaction. Only a hollow echo where 15 years of lies used to live. "Eleanor?" Lily appeared with my phone. "Ryan wants to talk to you." I took the phone, my son's voice washing over me like absolution. Behind me, Rachel spoke quietly with the FBI, while Olivia distributed USB drives to the board members. The truth was finally free, and so were we. The courtroom emptied slowly, leaving me alone with the echo of the judge's decision. Mark and Janet's sentencing had been swift, clinical, like excising a tumor. I gathered my papers, fingers brushing against Susan's old safety deposit box key. "You didn't tell them everything." Rachel's voice carried across the empty benches. She moved closer, her heels clicking against marble. "About Phoenix, about what really happened to the others. Some truths aren't meant for courtrooms." I stood, facing the woman who'd blazed this trail before me. "Some are just for us." She nodded, understanding in her eyes. "Derek called, said you turned down the board position. It was never about power." My voice sounded stronger than I felt. "Besides, the company belongs to the survivors now. All of them." Through the courthouse windows, I watched Janet being led to a waiting prison transport. Her red dress had been replaced by orange, her perfect posture finally broken. Mark was already gone, whisked away to begin his sentence. "Mom?" Ryan appeared in the doorway with Lily, his backpack clutched tight. "Are we going home now?" Home. Not the pristine cage Mark had built, but the new apartment overlooking the park. A place without secrets. "Actually," Rachel said, "I thought we might all get dinner. There's someone you should meet." She hesitated. "The woman who sent you that text about me surviving. She was wife number 1. My breath caught. "There are more of us. Many more. We've been watching, waiting. Susan wasn't the only one keeping records." Ryan tugged my sleeve. "Can we get pizza?" The simple question broke something loose inside me. A laugh that felt like crying, or maybe the other way around. "Pizza sounds perfect," I said, ruffling his hair. "But first, we need to make one stop." The cemetery was quiet this time of day. Susan's grave, still fresh, bore none of the elaborate decorations Janet had insisted on for the funeral. Just a simple stone with words I'd chosen. She protected truth with silence and love with strength. I placed her old key on the headstone. "You can rest now, Mum. We all can. Eleanor." Derek's voice surprised me. He stood at a respectful distance, holding a familiar flash drive. "There's something you should know. That you were investigating Mark long before we met at the cafe." I didn't turn around. "Or that you orchestrated our reunion." "Both." He moved closer, but not too close. "And neither. The investigation was real, but seeing you again, that wasn't orchestrated. Some karma works on its own schedule." Ryan wandered between the headstones, giving us space with a child's instinctive understanding. "I thought about telling you," Derek continued. "Every time we met, every document I showed you, but you needed to find your own way out. Like Rachel did. Like all of them did." He placed the flash drive beside the key. "There's one file you haven't seen, about Janet's first husband, Mark's father." The pieces clicked into place. She did this before. History repeats until someone breaks the chain. He stepped back. "The file's yours if you want it, or we can let it stay buried." I stared at the flash drive, feeling the weight of more secrets, more vengeance. Then I looked at Ryan, innocent among the shadows of our past. "Some chains," I said quietly, "are broken by leaving them behind." I left the drive where it lay, next to the key that had unlocked my freedom. Susan would understand. Rachel waited by the cemetery gate with Lily, their shadows long in the setting sun. Beyond them, I could see other women gathering, survivors I hadn't known existed, each carrying their own story of escape. "Ready?" Lily asked as I approached. I looked back one last time at Susan's grave, at the pieces of the past I was choosing to leave behind. The truth had set us free, but it was our choice to stay that way. "Yes," I said, taking Ryan's hand. "I'm ready for pizza." We walked away together, a different kind of family forged in the ashes of the one that had tried to destroy us. Behind us, the key and flash drive gleamed in the fading light. Artifacts of a battle finally, completely won. Some victories, after all, are measured not in what we take, but in what we choose to leave behind.